So once you do that reporting, let's talk about comparison. So how is data captured? So at Bloomberg, again, we take the information, and I'm using Thai Oil as an example. You can see the stock at the top. We take the information from the financial statements and we pull it into Bloomberg so that we can look at the environmental factors, social factors, and so forth. So you can see that I've highlighted the water use, and that in fiscal year 2015, you see 19,570. Where that comes from is, if I were to click in, it would say this is actually coming from the field of total water use. And where does that come from? That comes from data standardized in financial statements, and you can go right to the disclosure of this company in their financial statements. The source document will give you that information you need. So in a few clicks, you can find the information you need. This company, I use this as an example because it's not just their annual report. They have a separate report for sustainability. And we're seeing more and more of that across the region. So this morning I did a search by document for companies listed and set. How many reports in the last year are not reported as an annual statement or a semi-annual statement? How many companies have a separate disclosure, either an ESG release or a corporate responsibility release? And we got 140. So that's a big number. So this type of information, if you find that it's better for your company to separate it, could be more helpful for you in your transparency. So again, just to give you a little more background on how Bloomberg works itself, is basically from the financials, we develop a disclosure score that's a proprietary score from environmental, social, and governance. If your company has one of the three, information in one of the three, you're going to be between 0 and 20 for your score. It depends what you disclose out of the one of the three, E, S, or G. Now, if I step over the next level, you can see there's starting to be more information in this second company with more social disclosure. That's going to take you up to a score of 30. When you get more than one metric or factor within these three metrics of environmental, social, and governance, the third company that I have here, C, is where you go 30 and higher for disclosure. So you can see the difference of what takes you to that next step. And I always say this, the easiest way to get on the board from 0 is ask your HR department, how many women work in the company? How many board members are directors, are independent? That's the easy stuff, versus having to figure out some of your emissions information and, water use. So it should be pretty easy to get on the board under governance, and then from there, work your way up the food chain, so to speak. So you can find your ranking among other companies by doing a few different things. What I did here was I took a universe of stocks in Thailand, the 755 names that are listed here, and then I said, which companies have data? And I got 55 names, and then you can see the disclosure greater than 0, and I can sort them, and I can see who are the top names, and they're companies that you recognize. So for all of you that have data, because as I said, I know some of you are giving different information to set, but it might not be in your financials, check your own report and check your data with us, and we can help you. If you send your information, our data team will help you put this information out. And again, I'm not just saying that Bloomberg only, to any sources that are doing these scoring tools, you want that visibility for your company. That's your job as IR. It's not just about giving information upward inside your company to management. It's giving your information outside to your investors, to the analysts, so they can give you a buy rating. That's what's going to make the difference. The more information you give to them, the more favorable recommendation or rating by the analyst they can give back. So within Bloomberg, we have a tool and a screen called ESG itself. So you can basically break down the information that you've given us in the financials and do a deep dive comparison. So I've taken Sam Smith, and you can see in the top left, you can see broken down by environmental, social, and governance. You can see versus its history, it's getting better. From its last reporting period, it's getting better. If I am on the buy side and I am a manager looking at so many different companies, going one by one is pretty tricky and time consuming. But here's a quick way to say, hey, they're getting better if this is important to me. But versus its peers, they have a little work to do. So I'm sorry if the IR is here. But environmental and governance, you could be a little better versus your peers. So you can take a look and analyze your peers. Where are you, better or worse? And that's what the green B's and red W's are, to see where could you improve on your company. On the right, you get a range, and you can see the median of the group, and then across the comps, where do they rank for the high, the low, and the difference. So environmental, they're having a tough time, but social and governance, except for a couple, they're definitely exceeding their peers. So now when I look at the top right for the ESG scores, this is where I can go in to relative valuation and look further. Just to point out, the Robeco ranking is a lot higher than Bloomberg because Robeco is looking at performance. It's saying, out of these metrics, how is the performance of this company? And our disclosure score is based on how much information have you given us transparency. So that's why there are multiple sources and multiple scoring facilities providing this information, and you want to make sure you disclose as much as you can so you get visibility across all these resources. Again, I could drill in and look further on any one of those particular metrics. So here I'm looking at the water data, and I can see water recycled. Where am I? I'm 5.4. The median of the group is 29.4, and it's because Indorama's high off the charts there. So you can get a sense of where this company is. It's number 2 across the board. Some are not reporting at all, so in that sense, they're ahead of the game. So that's the type of information that can give you an edge when you are doing your quarterly meetings, when you're doing your one-on-ones with analysts or investors, or you're at conferences. Again, top down, you're talking about Thailand and where Thailand is as far as how much disclosure you provide. Then you're looking at your industry, and now you're looking at your company versus your peers. So you know what? If the sector is a challenging one in the current market, you could still be the best of the worst, and you could be the worst of the best. This is why you want to look across the board and figure out how to frame your story to attract investors with the information you're providing to be proactive. So, after you report this information, what else can you do? Some steps after that reporting. So first off, I always want to point out again, I keep mentioning transparency, but the more information you give, the more visibility you get. And again, you're working local and thinking about your local investors, but now you want to go to the next level and think global. So ESG themed indices are going to keep bringing better visibility to companies that perform well across these factors. So you can see in the US, there's definitely a lot of factors that companies recognized in ESG members. I know there's many more indices there, and there's much more granularity with metrics there because they've been doing this a little longer, but you can see that, we're on our way, we're on the board here as well. But then, you're only as good as the company you keep. Have you guys heard that before, that saying? So, kind of when you pick your friends, or you can't pick your family, but you can pick your friends. So this is a supply chain tool. And what this looks at is you could have a good ESG disclosure score, and you can be practicing the right values and ethics as far as the practices for your investors. But what about your suppliers and what about your customers? So you want to associate with those companies that also have good disclosure and good scores. And that's where it comes into play. And the reason why I use Nike is Nike had a bad rap a few years back before I lived in Asia, more than 5 years ago, as far as what were they doing with child labor laws in North Asia. And they really turned that around. They started providing more information and showing that, in fact, wasn't the case. And where that came from, it wasn't based on information in their financials, that, in fact, they could disclose by reporting more metrics and breaking down the information on product segmentation and employee segmentation, where people worked, what their labor pay was, and so forth. So this tool is really looking at, on the left side of the suppliers, and then customers that have information, and we have the Sustainalytics ranking, the ESG information, and then again you can add other information like sales, percentage of revenue from different companies. So it's important to keep that in mind again, because investors are starting to ask a lot more about supply chain. So something else, once you're past reporting, is funds. So in Asia, there are 484 funds focused on ESG. That's a pretty big number. So again, the more disclosure you have, the more followers you're going to have. So these funds are funds, if you can hopefully see, again, hopefully you're not in the back blind, because I don't have good eyesight, but the general attribute in the third column here shows you socially responsible, environmentally, ESG, you're seeing what the attribute is on these funds. So then you can take a look. If I were to look at 3 companies, do these funds all invest in them? Well, you can get a sense that if company A does not have any disclosure or any information, fund A is missing out because these funds are not interested to invest in company A. Where company B, you can see there's a pretty steady amount of investment into this fund. And then in company C, you know, there's definitely bigger positions from certain companies that are the biggest ones. So there's a lot of ways for IR to look at funds and take a look at what funds are investing in, what is their thematic mission statement around their fund, what index do they benchmark themselves against. We have all that information in Bloomberg. You can look at the different indexes, see if it's an ESG index from MSCI or whoever, to see, is this what this fund measures up against? Do we fit in that realm? Should they be talking to us? Should we be talking to them? But this is an example to see the difference across the top funds here. So now I want to just give you an example for these funds. How are they finding these companies? So this is something that might be replicated by Nipat, but when he speaks later. But I just want to show you a quick way to look at a case study of what buy side might do. So this might be a little hard to see, but Bloomberg has an equity screening tool. And what it does is it starts out with the security universe of, I don't think I have a light here, on the right, it starts out with almost 900,000 publicly listed companies. So when you think of that number and you think, okay, we're all competing for the same capital, that's a big pool that you're swimming in. So now I'm going to look at an index. I'm going to take the MSCI APAC Index ex Japan, and I'm going to narrow down this list from not only the universe to what's actively trading to this index ex Japan. I get 627 names. And what I decided to do, where the second arrow is, I took the top 100 ranked companies with ESG disclosure. Higher is better for the latest disclosure score, meaning it improved over the previous year. Down here, I'm going to go to my results, and I'm going to go back to that tool I showed you earlier that does screening and sorting. And so out of this, the results for my ESG disclosure ranking, I can then look by country of domicile. That's what I'm doing with the yellow, orange. I can look by country, I can look by sector, and then take a look, which companies do I want to be investing in? Which companies made the top 100 list? Going back here to this screen again, I can back test and say, I have those 100 names, so what? What am I going to do with those names? How do I know if this is a good idea before I pick one of those companies to invest in? So I'm going to back test this. How I'm going to do that is I'm going to take my equity screening that I saved under ESG disclosure. I'm going to analyze it between February 2014 to 2017. And why I did that is because that date is when a lot more regulations started coming out, and there's starting to be the discussions about the Paris Climate Agreement, the pact. So I'm starting there, and I'm going back 3 years, and my analytic parameters are going to be equal weighted returns against the index that I pulled these names from, okay? So I'm basically comparing my list of names, the names with the top 100 names with the top ESG score against this index, and now I'm going to run it. And hopefully you can see that my screen is in orange and the benchmark is in white. I've beat the benchmark by 5%, so 17% over 12. I would not look away at those results. It's pretty substantial. I can look at the spread and you can see that actually, if you look at the end of 2015, when the middle chart of the spread return turns green, that's when the meeting was for Paris. So that says a lot, that these companies started to perform much better. So that is a sign to take a look at. It should not be ignored. I can take that list as a portfolio manager and say, okay, I like this basket of stocks. I know they report well as a group. I can do individual security analysis to pick out the companies that I want from the countries I want and do more work on each sector. But if I like this basket and I want this to be my basket of investments, I can do that. I can pull it in to Bloomberg's portfolio tools where we have analytics and risk measurements and take a look of how is this fund performing and what are the attributes versus the actual index as a whole. And I can get a sense. And I know these numbers are really faint, but if you were able to see them closer, you can see the performance on the portfolio versus the benchmark. So not just that 5% higher, but then I break it down within sectors. So I can get a sense again, within this better performance of over 5%, what were the contributing sectors, and then I can see what was the active performance on these names to, if I were to click in, to see which specific securities that I want to invest in. So looking at the portfolio analytics, you can see that I'm looking at the factors and I'm looking at the correlation metrics across the different countries that are in this Asia ex-Japan index, and I can look at the percent contribution from Thailand, and I can look at what the performance is, and then I can also do a time series and get a sense of the performance as well. And so I can see between 2016 and now, you know, we're starting to see a turn in 2017 versus a year ago where we've had some up and downs if I look at this on a weekly basis. So what additional resources should you be looking at besides company comparisons, besides financial reporting and reading up on global trends from top down? Bloomberg has a new energy finance product where we break down, because hopefully all of you were here this morning talking about climate change, where we break down new energy by sector between wind, solar, power markets, carbon, energy smart technologies, alternative energy, and advanced transport. You can filter by geography, and then you can look at by type of information you want. Do you want market outlooks? Do you want research? Are you looking for data sets? Are you looking for analyst reactions, insights, reviews, and previews on what the market activity has been? Or are you just looking for short content? Once you narrow your search at the top, you can drill in at the bottom. You can look at if it's fossil fuels, if it is metallurgical coal, renewable energy, and so forth. And you can really drill into some alternative insights and viewpoints on the energy sector. So this is a good proprietary product where you can get some good insights if this is a sector that your company is related to. Something else, in addition, and I'm sorry this slide is titled Energy Finance because I really want to tell you we have templates to help you. Not only do we have that template that I mentioned before on how to find out what would be recommended for your company to report, but we have an ESG scorecard that helps you with a tool to assess your company's portfolio performance among other related securities where you can customize your peer set. We also have a portfolio carbon footprint tool that lets you look and compare carbon emissions against selected benchmarks. And finally, the ESG country risk tool enables you to compare on a top-down level of ESG factors across countries and where you stand. So again, it lets you look at ESG from big picture to company level using these tools that we've already pre-canned for you. Lastly, just to let you know, we come out with sustainable finance, news, analysis, and commentary on a weekly basis. And if you can see on the right, we cover everything across the sectors, but I can just read to you. The insights for this week that I've highlighted cover diversity, environment, social governance, so U.S. regulatory, then we have the Trump era, then we have lack of diversity in the tech industry, and green bonds and issuances. So there's a lot of information here to get your hands around as far as resources and research to help you with your analysis before you do your reporting. And hopefully this gave you a good sense of how to do this reporting, what's happening in the big picture, and then how to do your reporting on a company level and do comparisons when you go out on your roadshows, at your corporate events, or at conferences meeting clients. If you have any questions, please see me after. Thank you.